Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 807A, and today's date is November 2nd, 2015, and the title of this episode is Every Part of the Economy is Collapsing Except the Manipulated Stock Market. Let's get right into the economic collapse financial news. Now, we're going to head out to Europe right now, and out in Europe, they're continually telling us that everything is improving. A lot of the countries are saying coming up next year, we're going to be in this incredible recovery. And what we're seeing is unemployment ticking up. We see the debt continually rising. And right now, the European Central Bank, their massive stimulus program, really has done nothing except help the elite, the banking system. But manufacturing growth in the Eurozone basically is flat and it remains weak. So all this printing or creation of money or currency did absolutely nothing. Now, with factory production lacking, employment growth sagging to an 8-month low, and output prices falling at the fastest rate since February, it's easy to see why the ECB is scratching their head saying, maybe we need more stimulus. Well, we know for a fact this is not going to help. Look at the United States. Look at Japan. It does not help. All it does is continually inflate the debt bubble, help the bankers, and that's about it. It does not help the people on the street. And you can't help the people just by creating more and more and more currency. It doesn't work. Look at Greece. Look at the number of bailouts. Has that helped their economy whatsoever? Absolutely no. Actually, look at Iceland. They got rid of the bankers. They put them in jail. And once they did this, from 2008 moving forward, they were able to come out of their economic disaster and pay off the IMF. But of course, they don't want you to see that part. That's when the bankers get nervous. Now, out in England, we see that it's getting harder and harder for the people to survive there. London Mayor Boris Johnson said on Monday that the latest figures show that the cost of living in London is more than 40% more expensive than it was 10 years ago. So they're seeing a huge rise in the cost of living. And of course, as we've seen all across the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, it is happening everywhere. It's getting harder and harder to survive because the salaries, wages are continually dropping, and we're seeing inflation. Even though the central banks don't see inflation, of course, they're manipulating a lot of their calculations. We feel it, we see it. Now, a lot of corporations are laying off people. And as more and more of these corporations lay off people, we have to think to ourselves, where are they going to find jobs? Think about it. From last year of June 2014 going forward to right now, we're approaching 1 million layoffs. This is coming from Challenger Gray and Christmas. And what we've been doing here in the United States has been adding part-time jobs. Or, since there are so many layoffs, the government, when they calculate the BLS numbers, they need to get rid of people because they say, oh, yeah, they're not looking anymore. So we're just going to drop them. And if you notice, that number is continually rising each time they calculate this. Why is it rising? Because there are more and more people being laid off. I mean, UniCredit, 12,000 people are going to lose their jobs. Verizon, 5,000 to 6,000 people are going to lose their job. Husky Energy, 1,400 people. Chevron, 7,000 people. WEC Energy Group, 200. United Minerals, 138 people. Noble Energy, they haven't released their numbers yet, but they're planning on layoffs. And this is during a holiday season where we're getting these announcements. When we move into 2016, this is just going to pick up. It's not going to get any better. Now, U.S. manufacturing rose marginally from its preliminary 48 print to end October at 48.1. I mean, this is the highest since March. It's a complete disaster. But when we look at the ISM manufacturing, well, this tumbled to the weakest in 3 years. I mean, this is absolutely awful. But of course, the corporate media is out there saying, oh, yeah, everything looks really good right now. You know, we're not off from our highs. We're doing really well. Well, ISM manufacturing PMI dropped to 50.1, its lowest since December of 2012. The employment sum index at its lowest since August of 2009. So this is a complete disaster. The Atlanta Fed right now is recalculating its fourth quarter GDP, and as we know, the last quarter was 1.5, and it looks like they're going to be dropping it from 2.5 to 1.9 in the fourth quarter. Now, why are they slashing this? Well, they're saying that this morning's manufacturing ISM report on business, the forecast for the fourth quarter real consumer spending growth declined from 2.9 to 2.4%, while the forecast for the real equipment investment growth declined from 3.9% to 1.3%. So they're bringing it down to 1.9%, and as we can see, GDP is continually sliding downward. Remember what they had to do to bring it up. They had to include the penalties, the taxes in Obamacare. I mean, this is not how you push a country forward. People are not spending. There's no manufacturing going on. People don't have jobs. It's a complete disaster. Now, with the Petrodollar, we know the Middle East is in flux. We know the United States government central bankers are losing control there. And we know oil prices are continually being suppressed. We know the United States is pushing Saudi Arabia to produce more and more oil. And of course, this helps out the large corporations. It reduces their expenses so they can have a positive balance sheet. They were hoping that the people of the United States would go out and spend that money, that extra money, but that's not working. They were putting pressure on Russia. But we can see it's all falling apart. And the collapse in oil prices is draining oil exporting countries of revenue. With substantially low oil revenues, many of the world's sovereign wealth funds are dropping in value, which has ramifications for assets they're invested in. The IMF took a look at the connection between oil prices and sovereign wealth funds and raised the possibility that asset prices around the world could be negatively impacted. The wealth accumulated in oil-producing countries, since they need to put all their surplus someplace, they set up sovereign wealth funds to invest the money abroad. The IMF says the total assets from all the world's sovereign wealth funds is estimated at $7.3 trillion. Well, the surpluses quickly disappeared following the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009, when oil prices crashed below $40 per barrel. But then it came right back up when oil prices started to go up. But this time, it's a little different, because the collapse in oil prices is not driven by a global economic meltdown. It is a supply side story. And we're seeing right now that there's going to be problems. So what does all this mean for these sovereign wealth funds and their investments? The world's largest sovereign wealth funds were made possible by the huge flow of capital into oil-producing countries. The sovereign wealth funds, in turn, re-injected hundreds of billions of dollars into many different assets around the world. Notably, a lot of the wealth was plowed into what? U.S. treasuries, pushing down interest rates for the U.S., allowing for a large buildup of American consumer debt. Now that the flow is drying up, or pretty much dried up, oil-producing companies are starting to recall some of their investments, pulling out cash that has been parked in an array of assets around the world. Norway's sovereign wealth fund, the world's largest, just reported a 4.9% loss in the third quarter. The sums in question are, they're just huge and deepening on how they move. And this could cause a ripple effect across the global economy. And this would cause a huge, huge problem, crushing everything, because interest rates would go up, the economy would completely decline and fall apart. And a lot of these countries, are going to be getting rid of their assets. And this is going to pose a huge, huge problem. In Russia, they're continually telling us that the Russian economy is not doing well. Well, their manufacturing grew in October compared to the United States and most of Europe, where it's not growing. Russia's factory activity expanded in October, growing for the first time in 11 months thanks to higher domestic demand. This is coming from a market report. New orders rose for the second month running right now. So we can see Russia's economy is holding steady. Now, here in the United States, we understand they created Obamacare to try to bring in a lot of revenue to the government to help prop up the insurance companies because, they owe favors to certain people. And most of it was they wanted revenue coming into the government. And we can see right now that the revenue coming in is pretty much non-existent. And of course, when Obamacare first came out, they said you can keep your doctor, you can keep your insurance plan, premiums are going to be very low. Well, we're seeing completely the opposite of what he's told us. And right now, the premiums, which they thought were only going to rise by 7.5% in 2016, well, it looks like it's going to be much, much worse. Right now, coming from an analysis by the Daily Caller News Foundation, they're finding out that premiums are going to be around 20.3% in 2016. Why is this? Because there was a discrepancy on how the government calculated this. They excluded price data for 3 of the 4 Obamacare health insurance plans when the officials issued their recent forecast, claiming enrollees would face only a 7.5% increase because they left some of the health plans out of the calculation. It's amazing how they manipulate all their calculations. Now, as time goes on, Obamacare is getting worse and worse. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we know that Colorado, their co-op, folded. 80,000 people in Colorado, they don't have insurance. New York, Health Republic Insurance, basically is being brought up on charges for fraud, bankruptcy, and that's about 215,000 members. Right now, out of all the co-ops and everything from Obamacare, there is a 46% failure rate. Think about this. I mean, there are a total 10 co-ops, all of which were created by the Affordable Care Act and seeded with billions in federal funding. And they've failed. And this is half. I mean, this is not a system that is working because it is not a benefit to the people. It was never meant for the people. Just like everything the government has been doing, it's always for themselves, for corporations, for central bankers. It's not a benefit to the people. And we can see that there was an analysis done by the Heritage Foundation that the enrollment data for the private health insurance plans and public programs, they've found that 9.25 million more Americans had health insurance coverage at the end of 2014 than at the end of 2013. However, where did all these people come from? Well, the data also shows the Affordable Care Act, which is Obamacare, was all the members were brought in because of a Medicaid expansion. This was responsible for the net increase in coverage. So all the people that still don't have insurance, they still don't have insurance. And most of the people that were brought onto these plans, they had insurance. But actually what's happening now is they're paying a lot more for that insurance. So this is a complete disaster. Now we know the U.S. government central bankers, they need to find ways of bringing in more and more revenue because the debt is continually rising. That is never going to end. They're suppressing interest rates. And what's happening is, because all their numbers are fake, the people who are losing their jobs, they're no longer bringing in revenue. Those people who find part-time jobs, they're bringing in maybe a half or a quarter of the revenue. So this is why they came up with Obamacare, FACA, and the last thing they're looking for is a carbon tax, because this, they can tax everyone in the world. And we know Christine Lagarde was out there saying this is a perfect time for a carbon tax because it would help us reduce the debt. And they've been pushing global warming, trying to convince everyone it's your fault, your fault, your fault. And we know that this is a complete hoax. And what's very interesting about this is that during a congressional hearing, Congress was asking the U.S. National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration to hand over their information, their raw temperatures, their internal communiques. And U.S. House Representative Science, Space, and Technology Committee Head Rep. Lamar Smith of Texas asked NOAA, for both data and internal communications related to the study, led by Thomas Carl. Well, they gave them some of the data, but they refused the rest, and they refused the internal communications. In a statement released to Nature, Smith accused NOAA of falsifying temperature records, stating NOAA needs to come clean about why they altered the data to get the results they needed to advance this administration's extreme climate change agenda. Now, we see and we understand there is a plan here. And the plan is to get everyone believing that you are responsible for global warming. Now, yes, is there climate change? Of course, the climate is changing all the time. But they're trying to convince you as a human being that you're responsible for all of it. And they keep changing the story. If we went all the way back to 1970, all the way up to today, they keep changing what's going to happen. I mean, they can't even predict the weather day to day. And you want them to predict global warming? And they're trying to tell us that we're responsible? No. Christine Lagarde came out and said it. This is to pay down this massive debt. This is why they want to tack on a 10% wealth tax. And if they can't get that, they'll do it with a carbon tax. And from an agency not releasing their raw data and their information, this shows you they have a problem with it, because science, you can continually repeat all of it and you should get the same results. But they don't want you to do this. And this is why they're hiding all of it. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.